Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, Bootlicker Shells, Display Stars, Peasants, Vassals, Pink Fairies, Deviants. I'm a useful idiot, and today I want to report the death of Mick Farren. As my regulars know by now, I do geopolitics and economics, history, and current events, but music is my first love, and so I occasionally report musical stories, and this is one of them. And sadly, in line with many of them, it's the death of a icon, and in this case, Mick Farren. Mick Farren is more of a British icon. Most Americans are unaware of Mick Farren, but he truly was a towering figure in British rock. He started the Deviants, a crazed proto-punk psychedelic folk hippie band from the mid to late 60s, from 1967 to 1969. And they recorded 3 albums. The first one was called Poof. The second one was called Disposable. And the third one was just called The Deviants, showing a nun sucking on a popsicle on the cover. So you get the picture. They're pretty irreverent and modeled themselves after the Mothers of Invention and more of bands like that. But they're a mix of, as I described, proto-punk and psychedelia and hippie and soundscapes and craziness, unparalleled. And it's pretty staggering to hear, particularly in the context when you listen to their first album. And that context is everything. When you listen to their first album, and I'll actually attach their material below, remember that their first album came out the same year as Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles. So that'll give you a good reference point of just how out there the Deviants were. And an interesting story about the Deviants as well is they provided the foundation for one of my favorite rock bands, British rock bands of all time, the Pink Fairies. And interestingly enough, since I live in Seattle, was the fact that the Deviants actually came to the United States and got stranded in Vancouver and ran out of money. Vancouver, Canada, just north here of Seattle. And they ended up playing here in Seattle for 6 months in 1969. They got enough money to go back to the UK, but by then Mick Farren and the rest of the band had parted ways, and the Deviants turned into the Pink Fairies. And the Pink Fairies ended up recording 3 staggering records. And there's a pretty fair amount of Mick Farren influence on those records as well. And so while the Pink Fairies were recording, they actually helped record Mona and the Carnivorous Circus, which is Mick Farren's first solo record. Mick Farren continued to work in rock for many years to come. And in fact, his death resulted as a collapse on stage at a gig in London just this last Saturday, at the age of 69. So really not that old, but I'm sure he lived a pretty wild lifestyle, would be my guess, hanging out with the likes of the Deviants and the Pink Fairies. And Deviants and the Pink Fairies are more associated with the psychedelic underground, with bands like Hawkwind doing free shows, Edgar Broughton Band, and they really lived and breathed the whole hippie psychedelic ethos. And Mick Farren was certainly part of that. But he was a very sharp individual as well, and had great observations about current events, even going back into the late 60s. And he even said back then he was worried about the survival of human civilization. He said we might save the species and we might save the planet, but we probably wouldn't save civilization. I find that very insightful. And he went on to write for NME, the New Musical Express, a British music paper, so he was also an observer of music as well as participating. And he was an icon to all the psychedelic hippies. He was an icon to the punks. He was an icon to the classic rockers, and he was an icon to British rock intellectuals and writers. So he had an appeal across the board and managed to transcend all those genres up to this day. And he also moved into writing books the last 20 or 30 years, over 20 books, nonfiction as well as fiction. So a very prolific intellectual disguised as a rock and roll icon. So hats off to Mick Farren. Thank you for blessing us with these insane Devious records, and also blessing the world with the Pink Fairies after that. And your great intellectual, sardonic approach to rock and roll and British rock history. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.